All right, and we're live. Hello, everybody. This is Eric Maddox. Welcome to another live edition of the Latitude Adjustment Podcast. You'll notice that my co-host Layla Makhaiber is not here today. She's not feeling well. No reason to be concerned or anything. I don't want to worry anyone, but she's going to take the day off. So it will just be me and our guest today, and we'll be discussing, generally speaking, immigration issues in the U.S. and, of course, the neighbors to the U.S. in Latin America. So I have a guest on today, and I will pass it over to him in just a moment. But first, I want to give our listeners a little bit of background. If this is your first time tuning into the show. This is the visual form, the live version of what is typically an audio-only format podcast. And our focus is highlighting underreported issues, places, and communities around the world. So that's fairly broad. Our last episode that just was released about an hour ago is focusing on the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we've covered issues from all over the place, including the refugee crisis that's taking place in Europe as well. If you want to check out our archive of previous shows as well as this live broadcast once it's been archived on our website, just go to latitudeadjustmentpod.com. Also, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, and you can follow us also on Facebook, which is the name of the podcast, Latitude Adjustment Podcast, where you can get updates about live episodes like this one, and also as our other audio shows are released. So latitudeadjustmentpod.com, final plug, and now we're going to jump into our show. So I'm just going to let my guest today introduce himself. So please, if you don't mind, your name, where you are, and what do you do? And welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, for inviting me to your show, especially during these days. Just to have an opportunity to talk about this important topic for us. My name is Amilcar Valencia. I'm the executive director of El Refugio Ministry. I'm also part of a few other organizations, Georgia Detention Watch and Detention Watch Network. In my role as a member of El Refugio, we work with people who are currently incarcerated, currently detained in an immigration detention facility here in the state of Georgia. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Detention center is about 2.5 hours southwest of Atlanta, and we've been doing this for about 10 years, assisting and supporting people and families directly impacted by immigration detention.
All right. Thank you very much. And first, let's start with your story. What is your immigration story, and what brought you to the U.S.?
Well, my story is just a little bit, different than many stories. I will say it for people who are here, and especially those who are directly impacted by immigration detention in the United States. Um, um, I'm from El Salvador. I have been in the US for about 10 years now. But I came here with a visa, through a process called, a fiance visa, which is a visa for, people who have a loved one, and they can apply for this process. Um, I was, as I mentioned, I'm from El Salvador. I was involved in my community back in El Salvador, and I was a teacher, and I was working in different issues around education in my personal my community where I'm from, and surrounding communities. I met who now is my wife in El Salvador. She was there for the study abroad program, and we got to know each other very well. And 10 years later, I'm here in the United States. So I came with that process as a visa. So I don't have the experience of many in my family, my own family, who have come to United States in a different way. People who have came here, like my mom came here in the 80s during the Civil War, and she's been here for many years. I have many other relatives who came around the same time, uncles, and aunts who are here. Some of them are documented at the moment. Some of them have, are part of the mixed status families. Some of them have no documentation at this point, and some of them have been detained as well in immigration detention facilities while trying to cross into the United States. So even though I don't have the personal experience of myself, coming here and being, targeted for deportation, um, I do come from a history of family members who come here, have come here to the United States, just seeking, better opportunities, protection in many ways from violence and persecution, especially after the civil war in El Salvador.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. I mean, I want to hear more of your story, but I also want to hear more of your broader family story. And of course, we'll also get into the communities that you're working with and the larger issues here. But I understand that you didn't really come to the US like under duress. You came for love, it sounds like. Um, and that doesn't change the fact that you were an immigrant in a new country and that that has its own challenges. So, what were the most difficult adjustments that you needed to make as an immigrant in the US? What were the things that surprised you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course, I don't have, again, as you mentioned, the same reality of what people are migrating today to the United States, and that should be what, experience like mine and experience of others who have come here, through a process for everyone. So everyone should have the opportunity to come here in that certain way. And then when we, like, right now, when we people talk about, legalized migration, people, make these assumptions like it's very simple. Like, you just go back to the line. The reality is that, in my case is, one of the exceptions. There's just a few ways in how people can come, but not everyone is able to come through the way that I did. There is no line for people. Like, if, my family was, they were never were apply for anything like I was able to, or today, there is no process, so there is no line. So that's, I think it's important to mention that when people, you know think about the right, or the right way to come to the United States, this doesn't exist. If you are from Latin America, if you're from a poor country, if you're from, you know family who, or people who are like in the country, and there is no ability for you to apply for any kind of visas. um, Going back to your question, yes, I mean, the adjustment is huge, especially because I came directly from El Salvador to South Georgia, or to the state of Georgia, and the South, with, with this history of, incarceration, and I was placed, or came to this place where I didn't have any contextualized idea of the reality of immigrants here in the United States. Um, and the adjustment is huge, especially like language. You're trying to adapt to the culture and the reality here. I was fortunate again to have my wife, who's, you know knows the reality here, and allows me to kind of plug in into different things. But at the same time, you leave everything behind. You leave your family. You leave, I you know left my job. I left the things that I love to do back in El Salvador. So coming in here and don't have, like, I think that just don't the lack of any connections besides my immediate, my wife and her family, was a little difficult for me just to adapt to that. I was someone who was very active, again, as I mentioned, in El Salvador, work not only through my work, but also in the community, and in the organization that I was part of it, um, and through my connections with faith community as well. So it's like that was very difficult to me in terms of that adjustment, and language. I think language barrier is one of the biggest one for me. But little by little, I was able to find my way, and figure out, a little bit more what immigrants were, what conditions were here for people like me, or people who are undocumented, the issues that more concerns than here in the South, in Georgia. So,
Mhm.
um, it's been difficult, but at the same time, every immigrant story has their difficulties, and I think the main thing that for us is, you know, our community is resilient and we find our way. I mean, no matter how you came here, if you came here through a visa or if you came in a different process, or you were forced to migrate to the United States, people are resilient and people find their way.
So I would like to get into a little bit more of the conditions in El Salvador right now, and also correct me if I'm getting the terminology wrong, but I think what a lot of El Salvadorans were given when they came to the U.S. was something called TPS, or temporary protected status, right? And that this was one of the things that was suspended under the Trump administration. I don't
Yeah.
know if this is exactly asylum. I don't think it's quite asylum. It's something in between. It says that you're allowed to stay and work in the U.S., but asylum, I think, means it's more permanent. Like you can eventually work towards citizenship or something. So hence the
Yeah.
name temporary. So that was suspended from what I understand. Where is that out at right now for El Salvadorans?
Yeah, so TPS is just a temporary protection status. So it allows people who has it to have work permit. You can have a driver's license and and then do certain things, right? That um, people who don't have access to social security number might have a little difficulties. Um, so shield doesn't shield exactly people from deportation, and people still can be deported under this program. But if you have a driver's license, which is one of the main reasons when many people in our community are picked up, because they are detained for a very minor reason, traffic violation, and then no driver's license leads to the deportation of someone. So yes, it offers that protection in that capacity, but it's still people can be deported. um, this program was initiated in the 1990s, when El Salvador and several countries in Central America, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua, had major uh, um, uh, flood because of floods related to a big storm in El Salvador, Hurricane Mitch, that devastated entire communities. So the Justice Department created this program for those nationals of those countries who were already in the United States to apply for this protection. It will mean basically that they won, they will have some protections against deportation, as I mentioned before. And there are several countries that had historically had this issue. Some of them has related to natural disasters, or other in Haiti, for example, the earthquake in Haiti. And that's a program that the department has been basically extended because of the conditions either don't change as much, or there are other issues that arise within those countries. Um,
And to be
of
clear,
course,
El
Salvador.
Salvador also had a very brutal war, right, in the
Yeah,
1980s. And I think that some
yeah.
people left during this time as well, right?
Exactly. So yeah, so during the Civil War, more than 1.5 million people left El Salvador. It's estimated that about 1 million of them were like residing in the United States, so across the border and asked for protection here. Many of them were able to get some. There was some immigration reform in the 80s and 86, and some were able to get some documentation through that process. Um, so those were here around that time. Um, it is important to say that what El Salvador left during those 12 civil years of war, partially was because of the the support that the United States had in terms of supporting the Salvadorian government during the war. So sending a lot of not just training soldiers here in the United States, but also providing a lot of other support to combat what the guerrilla movement in El Salvador. So there is a clear link of what happened and how people are displaced, which that you probably you have done a lot of stories about that, how armed conflicts happen, how this country is involved in those countries. And then people have to migrate and people had to leave their countries because their livelihoods have been destroyed. That's the same thing that happened in the 80s in El Salvador and other countries in Latin America. Um, after the peace treaty was signed in El Salvador in 1992, there was a lot. There's like some reforms in the United States as well, and they started to criminalize young Salvadorans who were part of gangs in the United States. So they were basically deported. Some of them who had legal status, and that's what basically led to the rise of gang activity in Central America, but particularly in El Salvador, and that's how MS-13 was formed, and Barrio 18 as gangs were formed in El Salvador. Were fighting, so a different kind of war now. With the war, the conflict passed in El Salvador, but now there is a different kind of conflict that brings a lot of violence into the community, and now a lot of people have had to flee because of that particular violence in El Salvador. That's the reality right now. I mean, that's why many Central Americans are leaving their countries, because they either had been threatened by these groups, they had family members who had been kidnapped, or have been forcibly made them to join the gangs, or some of them have been killed. Like, there is countless stories of people who are fleeing persecution from that kind of group in El Salvador, um, that are seeking protection in the United States, and have been doing that for several years. I mean, we have heard the caravans and things like that. Everything is related to the issue of violence. Of course, there is people who are fleeing because of economic reasons, lack of opportunities, but the vast majority of people are fleeing because of just fear, and just protect their senses, protect their life. And I know personally friends and family members who have done that.
And I would just remind those who are tuning in, if you haven't listened already, we did an episode on Mexico a while back. I mean, I think over a year. It was around the time the migrant caravan was coming up through Mexico. I think it was right before it reached Tijuana. And we touched on not just Mexico, but on a lot of issues related to the violence in Central America and elsewhere in Latin America as well. So I would encourage people to check that out too. Just go to the website and you can use the search window to type in Mexico and it'll come up. So thank you for providing us with some context as far as your story, your family, what's happening in El Salvador, and the immigrant experience for your community in the U.S. I'd like to move forward with the work that you're actually doing now and where you're working. So first of all, let's get some background. You're in Georgia, where Stewart Detention Center is located. Um, what is Stewart Detention Center? Like, what is its exact location? How big is it as far as how many migrant detainees it's holding? Is it private or public? What's it there for? What does it do?
Yeah. So to back up just a little bit, because when I came here to the United States, again, I said I had no connections with, community besides my family, my wife and her family. So it was for me an opportunity to just look for, what is it that here is affecting, the communities. How can I get involved? And through that experience, I was able to find a lot of people who were doing, to my surprise, a lot of work around immigration detention, and I visited the detention center, and of course, uh, just being in that facility is scary. Just be in the outside, you see like the huge building. Um, Stewart is, and that's how Refugio kind of began. Our organization began to leading visitations to the facility, and um, being in direct contact with people who are detained and their families. Um, Stewart is located in Georgia. Is the largest detention center in the southeast. It has the capacity to detain about 2,000 people. Um, it was built as a medium security facility. So it was built with a specific purpose to, to detain criminals, right? To detain you know, they didn't have any contract already when it was built in 2004, and in 2006 they got a contract with immigration, but because it was built as a medium security facility, it has that sense that you are in, you are in a jail, right, like a prison, and it functions, looks like a prison, and it functions like a prison, and most detention centers are the same. um, um, is detaining male, men, but we have discovered that ICE detain transgender people also with the male population, which is horrible thing for a transgender women to be detained in a male facility, all male facility. Um, and that's routinely happens in every detention center. Um, um, it has a contract. So using contract, it's kind of obscure how they do these things, but it's basically the contract is between the government, so Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, and the county. So the county is contracted, and then the county serves like a third party to contract with the corporation. So it's kind of difficult how well, not difficult to understand, but that's how they can go around many issues around licensing and things like that. Um, so it is managed by CoreCivic, which is one of the largest for-profit corporations in the United States. They, together with GEO and other small for-profit detention centers, hold more than 70%. Right now, during COVID, more than 80% of the whole population um, of people who are detained. So 80% of the people, the whole population in detention, are held in for-profit corporations, which, for profit means they are, their main goal is to make profit. So they have to have, um, their beds filled. There is also um, they're able to build in their contract um, specific numbers where, like, even if they don't have um, their beds filled, they're still gonna get paid for certain beds. So I think at Stewart is maybe about 1,600. So even today, if they are 50% capacity, if there is like 900 people or 1,000 people detained, the corporation is still gonna get paid for at least about 1,600 because that's built into their contract. That's how they make money. They make money by detaining people. Of course, they want to have the facility full because there is more money for them. They control the commissary, the phone companies. So it's just a money making machine that fits into, you know, the detention of more individuals. Somebody leaves the facility, either is deported or released. Somebody else comes and replace that and use that bed. And it's just a commodity in how basically the system is built that uses people as, again, as a commodity, as means to make profit. They do that in many ways, as I mentioned: commissary, phones, um, you know, paying, like having the people detained doing some of the jobs in the facility, so they avoid paying, at least a minimum wage to people in the town, and they give those jobs to the people detained to do the cleaning, to do the cooking, and to do some other jobs in the facility. Again, this is how this system works, and people gets paid. People detained who do those jobs gets paid $1 to $4 a day. People who work in the kitchen get paid $4 for an 8-hour shift. Sometimes people are asked to work more than 8 hours. There's a lot of allegations about, this voluntary program is not as voluntary as they mentioned. There's a lot of people are being forced to do those jobs.
And those are, I mean, that's, I'm not advocating that it's fair to pay prisoners this much either, but calling them detainees is also misleading in a sense because they're being treated as prisoners. If you're paying somebody less than minimum wage, my understanding is that that exemption exists for prisoners. They're like if you are incarcerated as a result of a crime. Um, so there are a couple other points that I might add to this too, and I'd like to get your feedback on them. I mean, everything about there's a lot of different layers to how the privatization of the migrant detention and prison industry, frankly, work. And I think one level at which people might be unaware and need to be informed is that they also help write the legislation on how these laws are, well, what the legislation is and then how it's enforced. There's a lot of money to be thrown around by corporations, as we already know in the US, if you're paying attention to politics at all in America. And so these corporations are no different. And this means that they can take an active role in influencing the way that what laws are passed, how punitive, how strict they are, how draconian they are, and what the conditions are like and what they're allowed to be like in these facilities as well. So that money can just end up kind of creating a self-perpetuating cycle um, of inhumane treatment. And also, as a capitalist system and a for-profit industry, you can imagine like the interest is not in providing humane space for people, it's to maximize the number of people that you put in a space and minimize your overhead costs. So feeding as many people as you can possibly get away with feeding at the lowest cost possible. So you're not looking for like nutrition or even just like basic dignities. And I mean, the anecdotal examples are all over the place as far as like what the sanitation is like in these places, what hygiene is like. And then you have other factors like, well, now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we'll get to that as well. But I'd like to hear a little bit more about who is ending up in Stewart Detention Center. And I want to make it clear to our audience that like Stewart is not, and I think Amilcar's already made it clear, like it's not unique. It's not the only place of its kind in the U.S. We're talking about it because this is the facility he's working on, but they are all over the United States. So, who ends up in Stewart Detention Center? Where are people coming from, and what can they expect to find when they get there?
Yeah, and I think that your summary that's good, like about the cost, the overhead cost, um, the treatment, and how they, their main motivation is just make money, and then how we cut, those expenses, now allowing people to have, nutritious meals, or just to start with that, or medical attention, things like that. Who comes to the attention center? Well, I mean, in theory, everyone who is particular Stewart, as I mentioned, is all male and transgender people who are detained at this facility. So anyone who is in contact in the interior, especially in the southeast. So families, like we see a lot of people. Actually, when we started visiting a detention center, and even before El Refugio, there was a group of folks, which I'm part of, Georgia Detention Watch, in 2008, that they started started to pay attention to what happened at this facility, and through that experience, then in 2010 we learned that a lot of people are actually from the Carolinas, North Carolina, and South Carolina, who and that we detain because of, again, minor violations, because of there is, even though we're like far, removed, like from the border, but there is so many invisible borders, across counties, throughout the states, so cities that have this particular collaboration with immigration, and that which basically allows the local police to, in some cases, enforce immigration law through programs like 287G programs, secure communities, and other local ordinances that target undocumented people in many ways. So if they come in contact with the police, they ended up in, they very well can ended up in the immigration process. So residents of these three states, Georgia and the Carolinas, people who have been here for many years sometimes, or even recent arrivals. But I mean, we've seen people who've been here for 10 years or more, have roots in the community, and then because of the lack of documentation, again, for the same reason they are detained by the local police, ended up in the process. People who are seeking asylum at the border are also sent to Stewart, and that's not new to detention centers in Louisiana, detention centers in in other places that are removed from the border, um, but remote areas. Um, because along the border, they people come and ask for protection. They either cross and then are detained, or at the border they turn themselves and ask for asylum. So they're taken into custody and they're sent to different facilities. One of them is the Stewart Detention Center. So you can have people who might have loved ones in Texas and they were picked up in Texas, but they ended up in Georgia, or families who people who have loved ones in California ended up sent to Stewart, right? And that is like miles and miles remote from their communities, not only from their families and loved ones, but from any other support. Stewart is located in a very rural, it's in South Georgia. It's a small city. Again, I mentioned it's 2.5 hours from the city of Atlanta. So that by itself, you are disconnected. You are isolated from any community support. Any, like, if you look for attorneys, you had to fire someone who is in the Atlanta area, or other places, just because there is no, it's again, it's remote from and isolated from the support. Um, Again, so asylum seekers, people who've been here for a long time, residents of Georgia and in the Carolinas, and some people who also transfer from the state facilities, or other facilities. There's a little less, but I think the vast majority are between you know long-time residents and arrivals at the border right now, asylum seekers who are asking for protection.
So we've spoken a bit about who winds up in Stewart and places like it. But from my understanding, the reason that you started El Refugio was for the families. I mean, the people who are in there also have, in a lot of cases, immediate or extended family who are also impacted. When you're talking about the great distances that they might be from where they were actually picked up and detained, they might be leaving family behind in Atlanta or other cities across the US, or I don't know, maybe separated from them at the border. So, what what are their families facing, and where does your organization come into that picture?
Yeah, so I mean, the reality of having a loved one detained turns the life of immigrant families upside down. Like, you have, again, this is a male facility, and so most times, the son, the father, whoever is outside working, is the one who's been detained. So that by itself creates a lot of, like, just the if you want to just think about the economics of that, how that affects a family who, main, income is from, the person who is working is the one who's been taken into custody. Then the family has to struggle to pay their bills, rent and everything else. And so that's that's the reality of what they face. Um, of course, the emotional. I mean, there's just the linked between the families. Entire families are broken, and in some cases, the damage that has to their kids, and the trauma is enormous. That one day we're going to be just regretting why we're doing right now. Why are we, separating so many families, so many people, who are, ended up in the detention process, people who ended up being deported, entire families who now had to, depend on other assistance from community members, churches, or or other assistance that they can get, because there is just the father figure is not there. The person who has provided to the family is not longer there. They had to also find money to pay for attorneys, which is not cheap. They had to spend a lot of money in attorney fees. Um, so it can cost you between, it really depends how much this person is going to be involved in the case, but it can be between $3,000 to $7,000. If the person has a chance to be released on bond, to post a bond with immigration, you have to pay it in cash. and immigration bonds are not cheap. So they range between 5,000 at Stewart, between 5,000 to $15,000, and there are some that are a little higher. So that leaves, the family with just no way to fight for the release of their loved one, even if they have an attorney, but they don't have the ability to pay a bond. Um, they had to pay for commissary support for their loved ones, have send money for their loved one detention, so they can call and also buy supplement, from meals from whatever they get in the commissary. So that the economic part is completely like that completely destroys families. Um, and again, the isolation, the family separation, what that how that affects the family emotionally and mentally. The the One of the things that we discovered, as we said at the beginning, is that we were at the waiting room and we saw families who again drove 6 hours to get there, 8 hours to get to the facility for 1 hour visit per week, and they had to like drive back either six hours, after the visits, after being emotionally drained from having their loved ones seen behind the glass, and not knowing if that's going to be the last time that I will see that person, um, and just the whole frustration that they have with the system and the visitation process as well. Um, so we decided to do something very basic, which is offer a place to stay for families, like offer hospitality to them, offer 1 night of lodging, and we offer some meals as well, so that at least for that time, that weekend, that day that they're visiting their loved ones, they don't have to at least worry about where is it that are going to end it up. I'm going to going to sleep in the car, or had to rent a hotel and pay like $100 or more, and there is no hotels in the area, is 45 minutes away. So all of that um, was just an opportunity for us to open a house. And then that's what we did in 2010. We rented a 3-bedroom house, a very small house, and it started to welcome families. Through that experience, we have come to know about their struggles with the immigration process, and the issues that the people who are incarcerated face in terms of the abuses and neglect inside of the facility. Um, so
How long are people, just to understand one thing also, how long are people typically detained for before they get an outcome, either favorable or deportation?
yeah, it really varies, but they they do have the, and not everyone, but most times they do have the access to uh, have a hearing, and that hearing determines whatever this person has the ability to be released on bond or in other venues for release. um, but that can take maybe at least a couple of months, sometimes like 3 months before that happens. Of course, the bond hearings are just a little different than your merits case hearings. But so bond hearings might happen a little bit quicker, but not everyone is eligible for a bond. So if you're not eligible for a bond, basically means that you're going to be detained through the entire case. So until the judge decided that yes, you have a case and you can be released under these, sections of the law, or you're deported. So you are, talking about at least detained for a couple of months to the entire duration of your case. That can be 6 months, can be a year, it can be 3 years or more. It really depends on that. I mean, we have known people who've been detained for 4 years in at this facility as to where 4 years or more sometimes, just because they're trying to figure out if they can still fight to stay here in the United States. And kind of exhausting all the venues and all the opportunities that legally might apply to them for their release. Because I mean, the reality is that no one wants to go back to the country there, especially like if you left when you were, you don't have a strong connection now. You have like been here for your whole life is here, your family is here. You don't want to go back to your country when your children's, your wife, your job, everything is in here, right? If you are an asylum seeker who fled because of violence and persecution, definitely you don't want to go back to the same place, because if you're like being persecuted by gangs, they notice that you're not there for a little while and then you're back, right? Then you are definitely a target. So people try to do everything that they can to even know that that means that they will be detained through the entire process. People still continue to fight, but the reality is that several people they sign a deportation because they don't want to be there because of the abuses, because of the neglect, because of many things, and just the isolation that they live every day in this facility.
Yeah, a lot of what you're describing just sounds like, first of all, that the person incarcerated, detained, however you want to characterize it, they're really not in there alone. I mean, their families are in many ways like they're detained too because of all the duress that they're under, all the stress on them economically, emotionally, time, all of those things. It impacts everybody. And yeah, the other thing that I wanted to ask you was, what other work are you doing aside from providing the basic comforts and needs for the basic needs of the family members, as you mentioned? Are you involved in doing advocacy work? Are you working to try and lobby the state legislature? Are you working with other organizations like yours across the U.S. or across Georgia?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So yeah, so Refugio is been doing the groundwork, being there and offering hospitality, solidarity with people detained, um, putting money into commissary accounts, sending letters, doing pen pals, so trying to break that isolation that they're in, and finding ways on how to support their loved ones who are struggling through this pandemic and before the pandemic. Um, but we partner with many organizations that are doing an amazing job and advocating for the release of individuals. We have, because our unique position of being there and having direct contact with people detained, have the ability to also advocate for specific cases for their release. Like we know, and especially during COVID, and I know we might talk about these issues in a minute, but we know when someone has faced either medical neglect or like needs specific things, and for that reason a specific medical treatment, and for that reason that person is not, and if not getting that the attention they need, that person should be released. And we've been able to advocate directly on behalf of them, and working direct with them for their release. But through our partnership with the Southern Poverty Law Center, Project South, Georgia Detention Watch, Detention Watch Network, and other national organizations for immigrants, we know we are working to release individuals from detention and continue to ask people to, advocate on behalf of individuals in detention. As again, our role has been very heavily focused on the groundwork and supporting directly individuals, educating people about the issue. So just bringing conversations like we're having with you and your audience, in the community, like people of faith and other groups, so they can understand that this, the understand the issue, and hopefully not just understand the issue, but you know get involved and do something to change this reality of detention. We envision a world that doesn't need detention, and we are working towards ending detention, and for people to be released from the facility. It is a huge task that we cannot do it alone, and that's why we, align with the national and local organizations that are doing just amazing work. And we are there to provide uh, the information and the support, and then constantly looking for more creative ways to effectively seek the release of people in detention, especially during this pandemic. Um, and to end the inhumane treatment that people go through every day in the detention center. So it is a big role, and then we're dedicated to work towards what is basically the goal of local and national organizations is to end the detention of individuals, and then we should start that by saying that um, it is in an individual way, but also is in a more strategic way on how we target, you know, people of Congress. People have the power to change the policies, to act, and but also don't leave that to just members of Congress. Like we have a lot to play, a lot of role, a great role to play, and then we are again working with everyone who is willing to do the job and work to to advocacy to end detention.
So I'd like to talk a bit about the policy shift and to put it in perspective a bit. And what I mean by that is what things were like before Trump came to office and what they're like now. I mean, one of the catch lines that we've been hearing for the last 4 years or so is kids in cages, in quotes, and references to the separation of families and also examples of the excesses of ICE and ICE raids. But I also remember doing my own work along the US Mexico border about 10 plus years ago that there was already a wall there, that it was voted for in 2006 by then Senators Obama, Biden, and Hillary Clinton as part of the Secure Fences Act of 2006, and that there were separations and incarceration, like a lot of what you're describing already, going back well before Trump came to power. So I don't want to minimize the things that he's done in any way. I think things are measurably worse. But I also think that it's important for people to understand that this didn't just come about with Trump. So I would like for you to try and contextualize this. What policies have changed under Trump and what was already broken before he came to power?
Yeah. So I think in the detention, like detention policies, um, there were the years, even even I guess you mentioned even before the Obama administration, that there were some reforms taking place since 1996 to toughen the immigration policies, especially detention policies. So more people ended up in the detention process, and through those years, late 90s and the 2000s, especially around 2006 and 2007, new policies were created like 287G. So it was like that's how kind of the system started to ramp up detention and during like the Obama era is when we have actually more deportations than any country in the recent history of the United States. So there was already a system uh, built, a machine already built, and when Trump comes, uses that machine as much as he can and ramp up many other policies. So the family separation is definitely something that happened during this administration. It is important to say that it happened in some ways during the Obama administration as well. But what we have seen during this administration is just incredible, like increments on uh, no regards for you know families in human life. When you establish policies to like establishing a clear policy, everyone who comes to our borders, we're just gonna take their kids. That's evil, and that's what this administration has done. When you establish policies to criminalize those who are coming to seek asylum, that's also that's evil, and many other policies. I mean, we can list many of them that during this administration have not only impacted legal migration, but also those who have, right now under the under the deportation proceedings. Jeff Sessions, for example, eliminated section, not eliminating section of the law, but shift in how the law is applied, especially for victims of torture, victims of crime in their home countries and come here for protection. For example, women who were like victims of domestic violence in the past were able to apply for visas. That changed during this administration, and in many other ways, and how this administration has shifted the policies in the detention discussion. It is important to say that during the Obama administration, that's when policies around specific numbers for detained individuals happen, like the bed quota, about 34 people being detained in immigration detention centers. At the end of the Obama administration, the administration was detaining about 39,000 people daily. During the current administration, we have seen even in some reports, up to 50,000 people detained daily. And then we just saw the proposal budget for the Department of Homeland Security for 2021. That is currently in discussion or will be discussed in Congress. They are placing a 60,000 numbers of beds, like funding for 60,000 beds. So it's very clear that, again, even though we recognize the horrible thing that happened, that during the Obama administration, what they said, we're going to focus on felons, not families. That was not certainly true, because we saw a lot of people who were deported who did not have any criminal history, and that means a lot to bring it at this conversation. But let's call it what it is. But from that that era, you saw just a little bit of flexibility. People were have the opportunity to still have the chances to be released more than now. And what it looks like where we're going in this administration, and if we continue this way, we're gonna see more detention and more deportations in the years to come, just to
Where is
increase.
DACA at? This is the act that was basically to allow for young people who had come to the U.S. What would you call it? Like, not an amnesty formally, but a stay on any potential deportation so that they could pursue an education, et cetera, in the U.S. I think people refer to it like the Dreamers Act. What happened to DACA? Has that been allowed to remain, or was it removed?
So the administration has been fighting against DACA, for many years, and there has been like the lower courts and making, going back and forth about this decision, and federal judges have mandated that what the administration is doing, like the way they the arguments that they put to end the program are just based in not based in what the law intends, or definitely raises weight of interpretation. But the most important thing is that the Supreme Court has decided that the administration has to continue the program. They cannot just terminate the program. So I think there is still more to come. I'm sure there will be ways in how this administration will continue to avoid compliance, just to comply with the law and continue the program. But so far, people who had DACA can continue to have the program.
Okay, that's that's, I guess, cause for temporary relief, at least. So yeah, I'm seeing that we're kind of within our last 10 minutes here. I want to make sure that we get to the rest of our questions. So how has COVID impacted people in detention centers? I'll just leave it at that. I'm sure you have something to say.
Yeah, and I know we're about to end. COVID has I mean, advocates, we locally and, national folks sounded the alarm, even before ICE, even before we started to see cases in ICE detention, that this is, the ICE don't have the capacity to protect people. I mean, even before the pandemic, we have seen how many people have died in ICE custody and the medical neglect that people, suffer inside of these facilities. And so, and as like as we predicted, there's high rates of infections inside of the detention centers. At the beginning, ICE was now providing data about the cases, positive cases. People were not provided PPE. People were not provided. Tests were not done on people. Even if you have all the symptoms for COVID, like we have documented that, like people who call our contact us and say, I have these symptoms, I have not been treated, or like there is 5 people in my unit, there is like 15 people in my unit with same things, and they're not giving us attention. Some people were detained, so people who were detained have those symptoms. They did deny their access to medication or treatment, or or just to do the test, and then ended up being deported. And upon their deportation, or like upon their arrival, they their country of origin tested them, and they tested positive for COVID. There's like many cases like that. ICE started to provide some PPE around April, but not is very consistent. Like what we know as Stewart, people were providing masks, but masks were not replaced. Those disposable masks were not replaced sometimes with 2 weeks or more. um, and people didn't have access to everything like they need to protect themselves. Like they might cleanse the areas, but people did not have any cleaning, supplies to clean their personal things. People were not segregated, and like just the medical neglect that happened inside the detention is just that's horrible. Stewart is the second facility that has the highest rates of infection in the detention centers. I can go to the most recent numbers, but as um, October 10, I believe, there was a total of 362 people detained at Stewart, who were detained at Stewart, who had contracted COVID in the facility. The numbers has changed to 366. And there is another facility in Louisiana that has more than 400. So Stewart is still the second facility that has the largest infection for COVID. There have been about 79 employees, so staff guards who contracted COVID inside of the facility, 2 ICE employees, and there could be more. And that's the only information that the data that ICE has provided. It has not updated that data of employees and staff of the facility who contracted COVID. Um, 3 people have died of COVID at the detention center. The first person was a Guatemalan person who had diabetes, whose medical examination at the facility, uh, you know, basically they knew about his medical record. Type 2 diabetes has, according to the CDC, anyone who has type 2 diabetes has a high risk of not only just get infected, but have serious medical complications. So he died in the detention center. Another person, a 70-year-old man, Costa Rican, who also had diabetes and other medical complications. She not never been taken into custody after release from another facility. But I decided to take him into custody, and he died. He died about, I think, less than a month after he was transferred to Stewart. And another older elderly person from Mexico recently died on September 29, September 21, 21st, just 15 days after he arrived at the facility. He contracted COVID and he died. So there's already 3 fatalities of people detaining at Stewart who never should be taken into custody. And that's why we've been calling for the release of individuals. This is a county that has a high rate of COVID infections. I think is one of the 10 counties across the state that has the highest rates of infection. So it's a public, hazard to keep a facility open, and people should be able to go to their loved ones to be released. They can quarantine with their loved ones. They can take care of their loved ones. People should not be detained, especially during this pandemic.
No question. And I mean, I wish we had more time to go into the individual stories too, because people need to understand that these aren't just numbers. These are families that are devastated by these losses, and this is not necessary. Clearly, I don't know what else I can say in the limited time that we have that remains to drive that point home. But this is, it's a cruel policy, and the cost is in human lives and the suffering of the families. So I want to make sure that we get to direct people to your organization as well. So that's elrefugiostewart.org. Is that right? You're muted. You need to unmute.
Sorry, I always forget. Yes, Stewart, elrefugiostewart.org, or
Okay,
refugioministry.org, and you're posting in there. Our Facebook page is there too for people to find out. I think there is, of course, support the work that we do, support the work that other organizations are doing in Georgia. There is so much that people can do, starting by calling your members of Congress that you're concerned about what's happening inside the detention centers, that they come and do an inspection, unannounced inspection, and to release people from detention. Like there is specific calls to release immigrants who are currently detained at Stewart and other detention centers. Irwin Detention Center that also has the same situation, or like women who have been forcibly, have under, surgeries and forced sterilization. That's a big issue that we have seen. Plus the conditions in which they are at Stewart and at Irwin. It is important for people to take action.
All right. Before we go, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience as far as immediate changes that you'd like to see? I think you just listed quite a few, but is there anything else that you want to drive home before we go, before I kind of close out?
I will say that the most important thing for us is that people, if you don't know, that you educate it now, and then you educate others about the issue. That there is many ways in how you can advocate for people who are currently detained at Stewart, and then we might have people who are looking this recording in other places. Just look for opportunities in your state, in your city, that that have detention centers, or there is organizations that are doing the work, because we just need everyone to not only just care and be educated. We need people to take action. So this is just a call for us. We cannot let these atrocities to continue. The detention of individuals, the abuses, the death in detention. The world has 7 people who had died at this facility in the last 3 years, and it is clear that we cannot stand with this, and then we should fight for the release of anyone who is currently detained, and to end the detention of individuals at this facility.
All right. Thank you so much, Amilcar, for making time to come on and speak. I really appreciate your time. And
thank you so much.
Of course. And I'd like to just say also to our audience, I think a lot of this also, like so many social justice issues in the US and around the world, it starts with conversations we're having with our families and with our neighbors as well. And if you notice that there's people in your family, people in your neighborhood who have prejudiced opinions, uninformed opinions about other members of their community, whether it's based on where they come from, or their race, or their religion, or whatever it is, find opportunities. And this might even be us, like this might be you. Let's do some soul searching here. I think a lot of us carry around all kinds of prejudices, if we're honest with ourselves. So this is where I think that it's very hard for the hatred that comes from ignorance. It doesn't exist. It exists in a vacuum. And I think that what we really need to do is make a point of ourselves and also encouraging others, creating opportunities for direct contact with the communities that we have strong opinions about. If you've got strong judgments about people, if you fear them, if you're listening to what's being said about them, but you have no contact with them, there's a problem. Like, make the effort to go out and actually make direct contact with the people that you have judgments about. And I think what you'll find, as I found many times in my life, is that, we're fed a lot of propaganda, but reality really doesn't typically measure up to what we're being told in the media or by our leadership. So make the effort, if your opinions are formed in the absence of direct contact, to change that. Aside from that, work to support organizations like Amilcar's that are working at the local level, but on nationwide policies. That's huge. These issues aren't just things that are taking place far away from you on the border or in Washington. As we've just clearly pointed out today, these detention centers are all over the US. You have immigrants in just about every American community. So this is a nationwide issue, and it's probably down the street from you, if not next door. So keep that in mind too. And I would also like to point out to the people who are listening to this, who didn't catch it from the beginning, we'll be posting this as an archived video on our website at latitudeadjustmentpod.com, where you can catch all of our episodes, whether they're audio format or this video format, which we've been doing since the summer. And check out latitudeadjustmentpod.com. Go to the tab for live shows if you want to watch this video and share it. And thank you for tuning in. And please make sure to share this and look at it as a public education resource. All right. Thanks, everybody. Any final thoughts? I'm going to give you the last word, Amilcar. Do you have anything else you want to say before we go?
Keep fighting, educate others, keep the conversation going. And we need to fight we are not afraid until everyone is free. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.